How's it going, everyone? Good to see you. Another packed house, really excited about that. So my name's James Hush. I've spent the last 10 years working in the software industry, and I'm a firm believer that we can make high quality software that customers love without having to work like 40-hour weeks or being bugged on Chinese New Year, being bugged on weekends. And the reason behind that, I got a story behind this. So I was actually standing in the middle of an engineering room. It actually was a little bit like this in Southern California. Except instead of it raining, it was like a beautiful sunny day. Like there's people surfing, like wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was like, it was like, imagine the best summer day in Taipei, but it was like that every single day. But then all of a sudden,
one of the salespeople, she, I swear to God, runs into the room. And she looks at all of us and she says, "Okay guys, I know you're trying to rust. But like, when is this website going back up? I got all your time in an hour." So we looked at her, we looked at each other. We actually didn't know. We didn't know. And this was not only happening that day, it was happening every single day. And we're all like 22, 23 at the time. We didn't have a clue. So I went from there, and then a year and a half later, I was sitting at NFL headquarters in Los Angeles, where the film studio is for all the football, American football. And we're sitting there during the Super Bowl. And we had all the servers, we were watching all the website, all the servers. And then the MVP pool comes up and starts getting legends. And we start seeing people post on Twitter saying they can't vote for MVP at Super Bowl. And within 15 minutes, we fixed it during the commercial break. It was fine. So I was thinking, like, how did I go from like, we were working these 80-hour weeks and nothing was getting done, to like, we fixed NFL.com during the Super Bowl during the commercial break. And that's what I really want to talk about here. Today I'm going to talk about monitoring and alerting. And this is like a small piece of an overall puzzle, but by the end of today's workshop, you'll know about 3 different kinds of monitoring, alerting, and I'll show you guys how to set up monitoring for your own website, which is something you can either take back to your coworkers, take back to any clients, if you do any sort of like digital marketing stuff. This is really, really key. Now, the first thing is, I believe that under no circumstance should your customer or user find out that your website is broken before you know. Okay? No circumstance. Now I remember saying that in front of like 20 engineers at a startup, and one of them was like, "Okay, James, no circumstance?" He's like, "But sometimes things go wrong." Now on the digital marketing side, what do? You track your clicks, you track number of page views. You have all these metrics set up because you know if you don't track your clicks, you don't know what your conversion rate is. So you can actually set up similar things to make sure that your website's working. So the first one there is, one sec, uptime monitoring. Or as I like to call it, is the website loading? Now, this might surprise you, but every company I go to, especially the early stage startups, they'll forget to just make sure that the website's always loading. They'll forget to set up this check. A really good story was I was at a startup and I saw, this was really common for like marketing pages. So I was at a startup and they're like, "Well, we'll have the engineers work on the product. That's like the real engineering. But all the marketing stuff, we're just going to outsource to an agency because we don't want to bother the engineers." And then one day, the login page stopped working. Like it was 404 and for a full day, we didn't get any logins. So how do we fix that? The way you can fix that is you can use a tool that I'm going to show you how to set up later to just make sure that the website's always loading every time. So it just sends a request to the website, checks out it's loading, and then if it's ever not loading, you can send an alert to people on your team. So that's kind of the first step, is just basic uptime monitoring. Gets you like more than halfway there. Really, really surprising, and it's often overlooked. The second kind of level of monitoring is the error monitoring. I like to call it like, does it work? So first we're checking, does it load? The absolute basics.
Next, we want to see, does it work? Anyone have an experience, like you go to a website and it loads, but you try to click around, it doesn't really actually work. You click, you try to log in, it doesn't go anywhere. This is where like the error numbering goes in. So instead of just tracking whether or not the page loads, here you can use different tools like Datadog or Uptime. There's a bunch of different ones. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but more of having a mindset of like, oh, not only do we have to track, like say we're in marketing, we have to track clicks and conversion rate. Engineers, we should be tracking the errors too. Now, often you'll set up this tracking, and I set this up at a previous company, previous startup. We set up the error monitoring, and it was really, really humbling because instantly we had over 1,000 errors come in just every hour. So the engineers were like, what do we do with this? It's just a bunch of noise. Well, what we can do is we can take that noise and start funneling it to different places. So first, it's just turning it on. You'll be able to tell right away which ones are kind of like noisy. And then it's making sure, depending on the error, depending on the part of the product, it goes to different places. So maybe you have some marketing errors that you can label, and those go to the marketing team. Or maybe you have customer support ones, and they go to customer support. But it's getting that funnel set up just to like, kind of like shed light on them is the first step to making progress on that side. And then the final kind of setup for monitoring, I like to call it custom metric monitoring. Or does it actually work? So we have, does it load? Does it work? Does it actually work? Now this is where you get more like monitoring issues and errors and monitoring different metrics that are very specific for your business. So a great example of this was, have you guys ever seen, have been on Facebook or Instagram and you'll see an ad for a quiz site that's like, tell us your Taco Bell order, we'll tell your high school crush, or like, which Harry Potter character are you? So I spent about 2 years working on those, like the clickbait personality quiz websites. And we knew one of the most important things to measure was how many times the first question was answered. Because we knew if literally nobody was answering the first question, that means there's a bug. That means there's some sort of issue where it looked like it worked, a manual QA person might see, oh yeah, this works. An end-to-end test that's automatically clicking through stuff might see that it works, but in reality, the user's trying to answer the next question, they can't figure it out. No error is thrown, so the error monitoring isn't going to catch it. And they'll just be like, oh, I guess, whatever, and then close the page. So because we had that very custom metric setup, one day we released a new update. And on our metrics board, we saw that number of first question answered went right to 0 for Microsoft Edge, just for that one particular browser. So because we were tracking that, we were like, oh shoot, there's an issue. We rolled it back and right up the fix within 15 minutes. Now, if we weren't tracking that, which is pretty common, people aren't tracking these errors, we might not have noticed that until like the revenue reports came in the next day, which would have been like tens of thousands, hundred thousands American dollars worth of lost ad revenue. So another thing to think about is, like, what are some really important things I should be monitoring for my business or the team I'm working on? If you're like a software, if you're like e-commerce company, great example, just track the number of clicks on the checkout. If you're a software service company, you probably want to log like the number of logins or the number of signups. And finally, we have, let's check that the site loads, we have, let's check that the site works, and we have, let's check that the site actually works. So what do we do with all this information? So often, this is another place where I see people get stuck. They'll get all this info and they'll just throw it into a line group or a Slack channel. And then everyone just looks at it. And everyone assumes that everyone else is going to handle it. And that's where a previous coworker of mine gave me this really great quote. He said, if everyone is responsible for something, nobody is responsible
So I'll say that again. If everyone is responsible for something, nobody's responsible. You can't make two people responsible for one thing. The more people you add to responsibility, the more likely diffusion of responsibility kicks in and nobody actually handles it. So this is where setting up something like an on-call rotation really helps. Now, what an on-call rotation is just like you can either do it in like a spreadsheet or use some different software to manage it for you. But basically you're saying like, hey Harrison, this week, anything in that bug channel is your responsibility. And what you're responsible for is, you look at the error, you figure out if it's actually an error, and then you figure out how important it is. If it's really important, you either try to fix it, or you figure out who can fix it. And that's it. So what that does is, instead of having the whole team every time seeing an error, everyone getting distracted, and everyone working 80 hour weeks, everyone's distracted, you're only distracting one person at a time. So that buys the other 9 people on your team time to actually do their normal job. And by setting up this on-call rotation system at the previous company, within probably 6 to 8 weeks, I solved the Captain America engineer problem, which is the one engineer who would always get called in to fix everything. I separated him out and said, okay, Russell, you don't have to worry about this at all for this week. We have to let the other people worry about it, so it helps on the cross-training too. So from there, we can move into a demo. So what I'm going to show here now is setting up the first kind of monitoring, which is is it loading? It's the uptime monitoring. I'm going to use my website as the example. Actually, are you working for a company right now?
I'm working right
Yeah. Do they have a public-facing website?
now.
Okay. What's their website called?
Syracuse.
Okay, cool.
EDS. EOS.
Okay, sounds good. Here's how we're gonna get started. First, I'm gonna explain the first 5 minutes, and then you can have 5 minutes to set up. You can do it with ShareFleet. You can show your boss, impress someone tomorrow. So first, we start by creating a new account. So if you go to StatusCake.com, you'll see a button that says Monitor Now for free. You can click on there and make a new account. I'm going to log in with my account. So I have the account here. So we have a couple different testing options. I'll walk you through setting it up, each one pretty easy. So what I'm going to do first is let's pretend that I made a new page. I have jameshush.com/keynote. And this is a brand new page. I want to make sure it always works because I'm going to start buying. Oh man, right on time. So actually, you have good time. I'm just showing people how to use StatusCake. So if you log into StatusCake.com, you can make a free account. Yeah. So let's say I have jameshush.com/keynote. I'm like, this is a brand new page. It's a really important page because I'm going to start buying ads to this page. I'm going to get like 1 million people to come to this page. And I want to make sure that this page is always working because I'm about to spend a lot of money on ads because I want people to start hiring me for keynotes. Hint, hint, hint. So I'm like, we're going to make sure this is monitored. So the way I get started is I'll go to New Uptime Test. And I'll show you how to do this first for 3 minutes, and I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do this, so just pay attention first. So we have a bunch of different test options. For anything that's a website, you can just use HTTP. These other ones are more for like web servers, or for like game servers and things like that, or Internet of Things connected devices. And I'm going to type in the URL I want to test, which is jameshush.com/keynote. And this is the keynote test. I'm going to select default contact group. So by default, this goes into like actually sending alerts to people. So by default, StatusCake adds the email you signed up with on the contact group. If I was part of an engineering team, I'd probably want to put other engineers on this contact group, but for now we can do that.
And then we have testing location. And this goes back to what I mentioned. You want to make sure you monitor where your customers are. So it's actually a lot more common than you think for a website to work completely fine in one whole continent and then completely disappear if you're in another continent. So, oh yes. So by default, the free version of this will just pick a random country to test every 15 minutes, which is completely fine for our purposes. But if you got the paid version and you knew all your traffic was in Asia, you could select just to test from Asia. And at this point, I hit save now. And it made a new test. So I'll give you guys like 10 minutes or so to set that up. I'll walk around and help out. But the way, just a quick refresher, you just have to go to new Uptime tests. And there you can test any website you want. So you could test ShareFit, Zoe, you can test your Chinese language learning site. But the concept is the same. The idea is like you want something that's automatically checking.
All right.
Because then otherwise what happens, so the good news is everyone already has monitoring built in, no matter what. It's called your customers calling you and yelling at you. So the goal is you want to short circuit that. You want to be able to find the issue before the customers do. Because even if you find the issue 15 minutes before, that 15 minutes gives you enough time to come up with some sort of story, so when they're calling you, it makes a big difference. Or at least when they're calling you, you'd be like, guess where? That makes a big difference. Just that makes a big difference.
Make the customer feel like you guys are more professional and like.
Correct.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to carry on. So now we have a test set up. I actually already set up a couple of tests ahead of time. So I have one for my homepage, I called it homepage, one for my blog, and one for the keynote. So I'm going to show some more information down here. I'm going to show homepage because I've had this running for a few days now. So it shows you today's uptime, 100%. Got a senior engineer over here. It's a static HTML web page, but that's fine. But it also shows you the history of uptime, every day you've had it running. And whenever I'm like managing a team or running any sort of software project, or if you're like just a leader of a company and you don't have like a technical manager yet, this is the kind of stuff that's a big deal because oftentimes you'll have engineers come to you and be like, oh, everything's fine. But if you look at your dashboard and see it's not 100% green, then you're like, okay, then you know what questions to ask. And it kind of shows here like different test locations where it's testing from. So you can see it's working fine in Japan, it's working fine in California, working fine in France. So the next one is we want to, like seeing if the web page loads is one thing, but has anyone ever had the experience of going to a website and it takes like 15 seconds to load or 10 seconds to load? You're kind of looking at your phone, you hit refresh a few times. Well, unfortunately, this test won't catch that. This test will just catch it not loading at all. So if we want to get alerted when something's loading really slow, we can also set up a page speed monitoring test. You can test your own company. Yeah.
You think my boss listens to the word?
No, it's fine. Your boss will actually be impressed. Yeah. So this next test we're going to set up, this is going to catch the issue of the page loading a bit too slow. So I would definitely test your own website. So what we're going to do is next we're going to go to page speed monitoring. We're going to go to new page speed test. And let's call it default test and type in the full URL. So use the same website you were using before. I'm going to use jamestouch.com. And since we're on the free version, this will run the test once every 24 hours. Which is fine if you're not getting that much traffic. And then the cool part here is the alerts. So here's a good example. When I go to, for example, my website, I know I have a big image here, I have a YouTube video here. I know that my page should always be at least 1 megabyte big. So I'm going to set an alert that says, if it's not at least 1 megabyte, send me an email, because it means that something's broken. Like it has to be at least 1 megabyte. And that'll help catch those issues where the web page loads and it loads fast, but it just loads like a white screen with an error message. That'll catch that. And then we're going to set another alert. I'm going to set it for 5 seconds. 5,000 milliseconds is 5 seconds. This will send us an alert if the page ever takes longer than 5 seconds to load. And on contact groups, we'll select default contact group like before, and we can skip the advanced options. So I'm going to hit that save. I'll give everyone like about 5 minutes to play around with that next. Let's move on this. So here's an example of one of the tests. This will show you, for anyone who's at Prashad's workshop last time, this basically does what he was showing everyone to do manually, but automatically will run every single day. And so we can see it's taken like 1.5 seconds for my site to load. Shows the file size. Let me minimize this a bit. Number of requests, the content breakdown. And not only now will this alert you if the page is too slow or something weird, but now you'll also, or like an engineer on the team, you can send them everything. So they'll be able to fix the problem really quickly. So to get to this page, we're going to click on Page Speed Monitoring, All Tests, and then the name of the test you set up about 10 minutes ago. Okay. Next is SSL monitoring. So SSL is when you type in a website and you sometimes type HTTPS, that means the website's using SSL. SSL is a way that you can use like encrypted data. So anything to do with passwords, a checkout page for an e-commerce site, you have to use SSL. Now what's really, really common for small businesses and startups is they're trying to move fast and they'll buy an SSL certificate that lasts for a year. And then a year later, they forget to renew it. And if you forget to renew it, your entire website crashes. So by setting up an SSL monitor, we can get alerted a month beforehand to renew our SSL certificate so the website doesn't crash. And this sounds like a simple fix, but I've had this happen at every single startup I've ever worked at. So I'm 100% of the time. Not 99, 100%. Yes. So you got to give me a call. I got this handled. Yeah, exactly. So what to do? Create an SSL test. I'll show you how to do this first. I'm going to type in jamestouch.com. You can use the same website you used previously, and this is going to check every 24 hours. And again, on the alert settings, default contact group, and it'll send the first reminder 30 days beforehand, second one 7 days beforehand, and final one the day beforehand. This is awesome, not only if you're an engineer, and I mean not only if you're a non-technical person, but if you're working as an engineer, this is like a perfect cover your ass situation. Because if you're the engineer and the whole site goes down, you're responsible for it, and setting this up prevents that from ever happening. He'd be impressed. Yeah, he'd be impressed. Okay, so I'll give everyone 2 minutes to set that up. Okay. Now, the last check. So everyone pay attention for this one. So you have uptime, making sure the page actually loads. You have page speed monitoring, making sure the page eventually loads at a pretty decent speed, like not 20 seconds or anything like that. You have SSL monitoring, making sure that when the page does load, it doesn't crash and give like a red lock and key. Now, last one, tried and true problem, happens in every single small business, every single startup company, most big companies, is when you buy a domain name, usually it only lasts for a year, and you have to remember to renew it. And if you forget to renew your domain name, the whole site disappears. So on StatusCake, we can set up an alert for that. Correct.
They can buy it.
Yes.
Also good.
So this is another. Yeah, it's a good one. So here I have it set up on jameshush.com. And you can see it tells you the start, it tells you when it expires. You can see mine expires in 2031 because I just bought like a 20-year domain name. I spent all the money. I figured I'd keep calling myself James Hush for a while, so I just went with it that way. But often startups they'll only buy for the 1 year. So to set this up, we can, I'll show you, walk you through that. So everyone pay attention while I walk it through first, and then we'll give you a minute to do it. We click add domains, and then you add your domain without the www. So I'll give everyone 5 minutes to set that up. Here's a good example of what this reminds me of. If you're working with an outside vendor, it's common. So when I was working at the NFL, we worked with a lot of different agencies. So we had some engineers who worked for us, but then we had 3 different other companies, all sitting in different countries, working on our stuff too. And so because they weren't working at a company, they weren't incentivized to think long term like we were. And so we would set up all these checks and balances, not only to make sure to keep ourselves honest, but it also meant if a vendor tried to screw around with us, if a vendor is like, oh, this works fine, we have to go back to the vendor and renegotiate the vendor contract. So even if you're never an engineer yourself, if you ever have to hire an outside agency, set this up on your end, and then if the site ever goes down, you can go to the agency and say like, hey, this report says this site was down, this site was only up 95% of the time this month, which meant it was down for a combined 36 hours. Hey, this is bull crap, and then you get a refund. We've done that before. So even if you never learn how to code, if you ever hire someone else, knowing that these kind of things exist, even if you don't remember how to set it up, you'll remember it exists, and then you can remember to ask them to set it up for you too. I think the last thing I want to go over is this contact groups. And so if we go to contact groups, it's like default contact group. By default, they have your email. Now this is where I like the alerting setup here. So you could add your email, and then you could add your coworkers' emails, or your boss's email here. And they also have mobile alerts. So you know how does anyone, when sometimes your email, there's too many emails and you just don't check them for the day, anyone do that?
Yeah.
So here, we want to know when the website doesn't load, right? And so what you can do is add your phone number and it'll send you a text message. And so you don't have to worry about getting lost through all your other emails. And this is something I often do. I use, when I set more complicated monitoring setups for 20 plus, 30 plus person engineering teams, I don't rely on email, I don't use Slack, I always do text message monitoring. Because then there's no excuse. It's you're gonna get a phone call. And I've used another software that'll actually ring your cell phone. And so it bypasses all sleep mode, focus mode, all that. We set the phone number, the computer phone number as trusted contact, and it'll actually physically ring the engineer's cell phone. And we only reserve that kind of alerting for the site is down. We need to get a call. So that's something y'all can set up on the new contact group side. But other than that, that wraps up everything for me. Okay. So that kind of covers up the monitoring side. Learned 4 important things. 3 different kinds of monitoring. We have check that the page loads, period. Very, very simple, so simple most people forget to do it. And every single company I go to, that's one of the first things I set up. Second, check that it works. That's doing error monitoring check-in. Third, check that it actually works. Custom monitoring, custom metrics, making sure that if you're like an e-commerce site, making sure the number of clicks to the checkout button goes up. And then finally, if everyone is responsible for something, nobody's responsible for something. So making sure we funnel those alerts to one person and then spread out like the crappy parts of the job by setting an on-call rotation, rotating that person every week. So if you want to know more, I've set up a free email-based course, cnt'd.com/bugfunnel, completely free, no credit cards. That'll send you an email every week, all about how to make websites that are more stable and load faster and all that great stuff. Puts the fun and fundamental software development practices. But yeah, if you have any questions for me, line, email, and thanks again for your time. Me and Harrison will be hanging out right now.
Alright, big round of applause for James.